So let's give a few definitions of the labor force. So the first kind of definition is going to be about the potential labor force. And so the potential labor force is everyone who is eligible, and we'll talk about what that means, who is eligible eligible to participate in labor market activities. So who's eligible? I'll underline eligible. So who's eligible to participate in these labor market activities? So it's got to be civilian and non-institutionalized. To be greater or equal to 15. Have to be at least 15 years old to be in the potential labor force. It's going to exclude territories. And reserves as well. Reserves. So that's the potential labor force. So anyone who is eligible to participate in these labor force activity or labor market activities. And so eligible means you have to be civilian, so non-military, non-institutionalized. You have to be at least 15 years old. It's going to exclude territories and reserves as well. And so what the labor force is the people who are eligible to participate in the labor force who do participate in the labor force. So the actual labor force are those in the potential labor force who actually participate in the labor market. So this is the people that potentially could be involved in the labor force, and then those who actually participate in the labor force or labor market activities are going to be in the labor force. And so really that means unemployed and employed. So let's quickly erase this and we'll kind of give some definitions. Maybe they might seem really obvious, but we'll give some definitions of unemployed and employed. Who we consider employed and who we consider unemployed. So let's first say employed, or first give the definition of someone who's employed. This is someone that did any work in the survey period. It says the survey period. And maybe I'll do a different color. Or were sick, or on strike, but otherwise kind of would have been working. Like being sick or on strike prevented them from actually engaging in kind of any kind of paid work, but otherwise would have been working. During the survey period. So that's who we're counting as employed. So if you do any kind of work, these surveys are done, let's say monthly, and they ask you, did you work at all this past month? If you said yes, you were employed. If you were sick and said, I would have worked, but I was sick, so I had to take time off, but otherwise I would have been employed, then you're also employed. If you were on strike for whatever reasons, but otherwise you would have been working, you're also counted as employed. Now, unemployed is going to be someone who did not work during the survey period, so it's a month or something like that. But was looking for work. So you're unemployed if you didn't work at all during this survey period. So if they ask you if you worked in the last month and you say no, but you have to be looking for work to be considered unemployed. If you didn't look for work, that means you're not in the labor force. You're part of the potential labor force if you are under those conditions that we gave in the last kind of part of the video. But you're not part of the labor force if you didn't work at all in the last survey period or during this survey period they're asking about, and you weren't looking for work. You have to be looking for work to be part of, to be considered unemployed. So maybe now we've gone through all these definitions, maybe it'd be helpful if we kind of draw a diagram and break this down. So let's say at the top here, trying to get to the top of the screen but not going outside of it, we have the population of Canada. Or the population of whatever country. And we can split that up into those who are eligible for the labor, to be in the labor force, and those who are not eligible. So over here, let's say we have people who are not eligible to be in the labor force, so this would be those people who are less than 15 years old, reserves, people who live on reserves, people who are institutionalized, and those who live in territories are all part of this not eligible to be in this, in the labor force, right? And then so on the other side, we have those who are eligible. Right, so those who are greater than 15, civilian, don't live on reserves, or are not institutionalized. Then from this group, we have those who are in the labor force, and we have those, maybe I'll put arrows since I started doing arrows here, who are not in the labor force. And so those who are not in the labor force are people who are in school. They might be retired. They might be engaging in home production. They might be volunteering. Or maybe they're discouraged workers. And so what a discouraged worker is someone who is not looking for a job. They're unemployed and not looking for a job. They looked for a while and they get discouraged, they can't find anything, so they're not even trying to find a job anymore. So they're not in the labor force if they're not seeking employment. So we kind of label them as discouraged workers. Now, in terms of in the labor force, we have two different groups. We have those who are employed and those who are unemployed. Employed and unemployed. So unemployed, but you have to be looking for work. So in the labor force and looking for work. So these are people who worked. Oops, shouldn't be a greater than, has to be greater than 0, not greater or equal to 0, just greater than 0. They have to work some positive hours or minutes. So this is kind of the breakdown of these definitions that we just gave. So we have the entire population at the top, those who are not eligible to be in the labor force. So those who are less than 15, who live on reserves, who are institutionalized, or those in the territories. We have those eligible, so the potential labor force. And then out of this potential labor force, we have those who are not participating in the labor force because they're either in school, or they're retired, or they're doing unpaid home production, so raising kids or doing whatever at home. We have volunteers. They're not considered part of the labor force because they're not engaging in paid work. And we have those who are kind of, that maybe were in the labor force before, but they're really discouraged from not finding a job, so they're not even looking for work anymore. So that's out, not in the labor force, even though they're eligible. They're in the potential labor force, but not in the labor force. So in the labor force, we have two groups: those who are employed, so they worked more than 0 hours, and those who are unemployed. But remember, those who are unemployed have to be looking for work. If they're not looking for work and they're unemployed, they're not in the labor force. So hopefully this helped kind of break down all these different definitions that we just kind of went over.